It is close to midnight on September 12, 1942. In the waters of the South Atlantic off the coast of West Africa, over 2,700 people find themselves in shark-infested waters and battling for survival. Only an hour earlier, they were on board a British requisitioned ocean liner en route to Sierra Leone and the port of Freetown. But an encounter with a German U-boat will mean that more than half will not survive. The ship is the RMS Laconia, and the events that will unfold will change the rules of submarine warfare for the remainder of World War II. On the 9th of April 1921, RMS Laconia was launched into the River Tyne from a slipway at Swanhunter shipyard in Wallsend, northeast England. She was ordered by the Cunard Line to serve on the Liverpool to Boston and New York transatlantic route. With a length of 601 feet, a beam of 74 feet and a draft of 32 feet, she came in with a gross registered tonnage of 19,695 tonnes. She was fitted out to carry 350 first-class passengers, 350 second-class passengers and 1,500 third-class passengers. However, with the outbreak of war, the British Admiralty drafted her into service, fitted her with 8 6-inch guns and 2 3-inch high-angle guns, and put to work firstly as an armed merchant cruiser and later, in early 1942, a troop ship. She spent much of her time ferrying troops around Africa and the Middle East. What turned out to be her final voyage, however, was scheduled to sail from Cape Town in South Africa to Freetown in Sierra Leone. On board, there were 463 officers and crew, 87 civilians, 286 British soldiers, 1,793 Italian prisoners of war who were being guarded by 103 Polish soldiers, giving a total of 2,732 souls on board. The voyage that would end in disaster. Early in the morning on September 12, 1942, German U-boat U-156 was patrolling the waters off the coast of West Africa, halfway between Liberia and Ascension Island. Off in the distance, the U-boat's commanding officer, Korvettenkapitän Werner Hartenstein, spotted what looked like a large British ship, and it was quickly identified as the RMS Laconia. Since the Laconia was serving as an armed ship, it was a legitimate target. Hartenstein decided to stalk his target, running parallel with her and slowly closing the gap. His intention was to wait until the hours of darkness before attacking. By 10 p.m, and with the sun setting, U-156 was now some 2 miles away. Hartenstein readied his crew for attack, and at 10:19 he fired. It took 3 minutes for a pair of torpedoes to reach the Laconia, and they both hit home and detonated. At 10:22 p.m, the Laconia sent out a distress signal.
SSS 0434 South and 1125 West. Laconia torpedoed.
The SSS code indicated a submarine attack. The order to abandon ship came swiftly. The ship had enough lifeboats for everyone on board, but due to her quickly settling into a heavy list, only half could be launched in time. The Italian prisoners of war that were locked deep in the cargo holds managed to escape by breaking down hatches or climbing ventilation shafts. In the chaos, some of the prisoners rushed the lifeboats only to be shot or bayoneted by Polish guards, who were armed with rifles, but few had any ammunition. Witnesses reported that most of the casualties were caused by bayonets. By the time the final lifeboats were launched, many passengers were already in the water, leaving some boats with few occupants. The rest had to jump into the sea. Survivors later described the horrific scene. Italians in the water were either shot or had their hands severed with axes when they tried to climb into lifeboats. The blood in the water attracted sharks. Corporal Dino Monte, one of the few Italian survivors, recalled,
"Sharks darted among us, grabbing an arm, biting a leg. Other larger beasts swallowed entire bodies."
As the Laconia slowly sank, bow first, Hartenstein brought U-156 to the surface to capture the ship's senior officers. The sight that met him, however, was the sight of over 2,000 people battling for survival in the water. The realisation quickly dawned on Hartenstein that the people in the water were mainly POWs and civilians. He immediately launched a rescue operation, hoisting the Red Cross flag in doing so. A little over an hour after the attack, at 11:23 p.m, the Laconia finally sank. By 1:25 a.m. on September 13th, Hartenstein sent a frantic coded message to his superiors.
Sunk by Hartenstein, British Laconia, unfortunately, with 1,500 Italian POWs, 90 fished out of the water so far. Request orders.
Admiral Karl Dönitz, head of submarine operations, sprang into action. He diverted 7 U-boats from the Eisbär Wolfpack, which had been poised for a surprise attack on Cape Town, to rescue survivors. Dönitz then reported this to Berlin. Hitler was livid and ordered the rescue to be aborted. Admiral Erich Raeder reversed Dönitz's orders, redirecting the Eisbär boats, including Hartenstein's U-156, back to Cape Town. Instead, Raeder arranged an alternative rescue party, dispatching U-506, U-507 and the Italian submarine Commandant Capellini to intercept Hartenstein and rescue any remaining Italians. He then called on the Vichy French to send warships from Dakar and Ivory Coast to retrieve the survivors from the submarines. The Vichy French responded by sending cruiser Gloire from Dakar and 2 sloops, the swift 660-ton Annamite from Conakry, French Guinea, and the larger 2,000-ton Dumont-de-Ville from Cotonou in Dahomey. Dönitz informed Hartenstein of Raeder's orders. The new directive was clear. All boats, including Hartenstein, only take as many men into the boats as will allow it to be fully ready for action when submerged. U-156 quickly filled to capacity, with nearly 200 survivors crammed above and below decks, including 5 women, and another 200 being towed in 4 lifeboats. At 6 a.m. on September 13th, Hartenstein broadcast an urgent, uncoded message in English to all nearby ships, pleading for assistance and promising not to attack.
If any ship will assist the shipwrecked Laconia crew, I will not attack her, providing I am not being attacked by ship or air force. I have picked up 193 men. 4°53 south, 11°26 west. German submarine.
In Freetown, the British had heard this message, but, suspecting a trap, dismissed it. 2 days later, on September 15th, a garbled message reached the Americans, stating that Laconia had been torpedoed and that the British ship Empire Haven was en route to rescue survivors. The message, however, had failed to mention the German rescue efforts or the involvement of neutral French ships, and that an effective ceasefire was in place. For 2.5 tense days, U-156 stayed on the surface, until at 11:30 a.m. on September 15th, U-506 arrived, followed shortly after by U-507 and Commandant Capellini. With lifeboats in tow and decks crowded with survivors, the 4 submarines made their way towards the African coast, aiming to meet up with the Vichy French warships dispatched from Senegal and Dahomey. Over the course of the night, the submarines lost contact with each other. On September 16 at 11:25 a.m, an American B-24 Liberator from a secret base on Ascension spotted U-156. The submarine was displaying a Red Cross flag on its gun deck. Hartenstein signalled the pilot in Morse code and English, asking for help. A British officer on board also sent a message.
RAF officer speaking from German submarine, Laconia survivors on board, soldiers, civilians, women, children.
The pilot of the B-24, Lieutenant James D. Harden, did not respond to these messages. Instead, he informed his base of the situation. Captain Robert C. Richardson III, the senior officer on duty, unaware that this was a Red Cross sanctioned rescue mission, ordered the B-24 to sink the sub. Richardson later claimed he thought the rules of war did not allow a combat ship to fly Red Cross flags, and was concerned the German submarine might attack Allied freighters or discover and attack the secret Ascension airfield. Harden returned to the scene and at 12:32 p.m. attacked with bombs and depth charges. One bomb hit among the lifeboats towed by U-156, killing many of the survivors, while other charges caused minor damage to the submarine. Hartenstein ordered the lifeboats to be set adrift and the survivors on deck into the water, then submerged the submarine slowly to allow those still on deck to escape. Harden's report indicated that he made 4 attack runs. The bombs and depth charges failed to release on the first 3, but he dropped 2 bombs on the 4th run. The Liberator crew later received medals for the supposed sinking of U-156, although they had only sunk 2 lifeboats. Despite Hartenstein's plea for survivors to wait for rescue by the Vichy French, 2 lifeboats decided to head for Africa. One, starting with 68 people, reached the African coast 27 days later, with only 16 survivors still alive. The other was rescued by a British trawler after 40 days at sea, with just 4 of its 52 occupants still alive. Unaware of the US attack, U-507 and U-506 and the Italian submarine Capellini continued rescuing survivors. The next morning, Commander Revedin of Capellini found himself rescuing those set adrift by U-156. At 11:30 am, he received a message.
Bordeaux to Capellini. Reporting attack already undergone by other submarines. Be ready to submerge for action against the enemy. Put shipwrecked on rafts except women, children, and Italians. Keep British prisoners. Keep strictest watch for enemy planes and submarines. End of message.
U-507 and U-506 confirmed the attack on U-156 and reported the number of survivors rescued. Commander Schacht of U-507 reported 491 survivors, including 15 women and 16 children. Commander Verdeman of U-506 confirmed 151 survivors, including 9 women and children. Headquarters then ordered them to cast adrift all British and Polish survivors, mark their positions, and proceed quickly to the rescue rendezvous. However, both commanders chose not to abandon any survivors. Richardson's order and Harden's attack have been labelled potential Allied war crimes. The Conventions of War at Sea state that vessels, including submarines, engaged in rescue operations should be immune from attack. 5 B-25 Mitchell bombers from Ascension, along with Harden's B-24, scoured the seas for submarines for as long as daylight would allow. On September 17th, a B-25 spotted Laconia's lifeboats and notified the Empire Haven of their location. Harden's B-24 then encountered U-506, which had 151 survivors on board, including 9 women and children, and attacked. On the first pass, the bombs failed to release. U-506 crash dived, and on the second pass, the B-24 dropped 2 500-pound bombs and 2 350-pound depth charges, but they caused no damage. That same day, the British in Freetown sent a message to Ascension indicating that 3 French ships from Dakar were on their way. Captain Richardson on Ascension, fearing an invasion, cancelled the submarine hunt to prepare for defence. The French cruiser Gloire picked up 52 British survivors about 100 kilometres from the rendezvous point. Gloire then met the sloop Animate, and both reached U-507 and U-506 at the rendezvous a little after 2 p.m. on September 17th. Apart from 2 British officers who remained on U-507, all survivors were transferred to the rescue ships. Gloire continued, and within 4 hours had rescued survivors from 11 more lifeboats. And at 10 p.m, Gloire found another lifeboat, and then continued her journey to the planned rendezvous with Animate. At 1 a.m, a lookout spotted a light on the horizon. Investigating this, Gloire rescued another 84 survivors, delaying the rendezvous, but saving yet more lives. The ships eventually met at 9:30 a.m, and Animate transferred her survivors to Gloire. A count revealed 373 Italians, 70 Poles, and 597 British, including 48 women and children. Gloire arrived in Dakar on the 21st of September. Meanwhile, the submarine Capellini, unable to find the French warships, radioed for instructions and awaited a response. The French sloop Dumont de Ville was dispatched and by chance rescued a lifeboat from the British cargo ship Trevally, which had been torpedoed on September the 12th. After an unsuccessful search for other Trevally survivors, Dumont de Ville met Capellini on September the 20th. Apart from 6 Italians and 2 British officers, all survivors were transferred to Dumont de Ville, which then transferred the Italians to Animate, transporting them to Dakar on September 24th. Of Laconia's original 2,741 complement, only 1,083 survived. Of the 1,658 who perished, 1,420 were Italian prisoners of war, though some estimates place the death toll at 1,757. The Laconia Incident had profound and lasting effects. Before this event, it was not uncommon for U-boats to aid survivors of their torpedo attacks with food, water, basic medical care, and directions to the nearest land. Bringing survivors aboard was rare due to the limited space on U-boats. However, on September 17, 1942, in response to the incident, Admiral Karl Dönitz issued the Triton Null Order, later becoming known as the Laconia Order, prohibiting U-boat crews from rescuing survivors. Despite this, some U-boats continued to provide occasional aid. At the Nuremberg trials in 1946, Dönitz faced war crimes charges, with the Laconia Order being a key point of the prosecution. However, this strategy backfired, allowing the defence to highlight numerous instances where German submarines acted humanely, contrasting with the perceived callousness of the Allies. Dönitz argued that the Laconia Order came about directly from the attack on a rescue operation by US aircraft. The Americans themselves had also engaged in unrestricted submarine warfare under their equivalent of the Laconia Order since entering the war. The wartime commander-in-chief of the US Pacific Fleet, Admiral Chester Nimitz, provided written testimony for Dönitz, stating that the US Navy had practiced unrestricted submarine warfare in the Pacific from the very first day of the war. This testimony influenced the Nuremberg Tribunal to avoid sentencing Dönitz for this breach of law, despite his conviction on several other counts. Volume 65 of the Naval War College series, International Law Studies, examines the Laconia Incident in the context of World War II submarine warfare laws. It states that the order to attack and the actions of the aircraft commander who executed it were war crimes, as the commander must have seen the ongoing rescue operation. Submarines engaged in rescue efforts should not be attacked, and the lack of investigation or trials by the US Army Air Force reflects poorly on the military command. This is a very controversial story, and I'd love to hear what your thoughts are in the comments below. Thanks very much for watching. Please don't forget to hit the like button and consider subscribing.